Let me note to you, first of all, that this is the next to the last session. Yeah, when you're having fun, time flies. So remember, next week will be the end of the Plantagenet line, the direct line. But I started thinking, where should we go next? And I'm hoping you all will accept this, that I would go next to, the Wars of the Roses, Lancastrians, as in Shakespeare. Yeah, lots of plays, because I was just reading about John of Gaunt and all the rest that we recall from our studies, I'm sure. Yes, Shakespearean studies. Yeah, even if we had to use those yellow and black books. But enough of that said, not to single out people, just that we understand that this could take us all the way through the Stuarts and before them, the Tudors. So I could get you to the 18th century if you could keep on coming. Think that would be May of 26. I don't mean to get ahead here, but I'm just telling you, I like to plan ahead. Okay, so that's 25, 26 for you, because there's plenty. And no, I do not intend to spend extra time on the wives of Henry VIII. Okay, I believe that's been done before, so I'm really as interested in the wife of Henry VII, if you want to know the truth. But I know we'll do the wives, just in case there could be anyone who doesn't know them by heart and in order. It's like, the American presidents, you would know the wives of Henry VIII. I understand that was part of your education, and I respect that, sort of. But the idea of the wives, and don't we all hear that when we take the tour of the Tower of London? Isn't that part of what they always talk about? Whatever the case, I think you're probably more interested in the transformation from Catholicism to Anglicanism, or learning about the development of Parliament. It'll all be here for you. Okay, so I hope you'll come back then, March, please.
Are you watching Wolf Hall on PBS on Sunday nights?
No, do I need to? No. Okay, how would it benefit me? I mean, how would it be, is it a pedagogical need that I have? I mean, am I lacking?
You could be a consultant for it.
Oh,
There's
could there be cold hard cash? Because I'm pretty
just
merciful.
an A in the class.
Okay, so you would, could you do a presentation?
Consultant.
Oh, well, thank you. Now this isn't the one about Oliver Cromwell and all that.
It is.
Okay, that's very nice. I've seen parts of it, and yeah.
And we've had a lot of weather too.
How was that for somewhat dismissively? Yeah. Did I do that pretty well? Oh, for sure. But if you come to this class in 2026, I can present my perspective on Cromwell.
Well, I'll just stop watching.
Would you want, but I mean, maybe you'd want that as an alternative. I don't have all the things. Maybe I'm inadequate, but I'll try the best I can. Thank you for that. I'll try to deal with the pain that I'm in now. Yeah, I'm in crisis mode, but so what did we talk about? The Parliament. Well, I'll tell you what, if you look it up online, the first thing you'll hear about the 18th century, because you know who's coming. Kilts, berets, the whole Scottish business. We're going to have that United Kingdom. And those Scots are coming. But that's not what we're here for. We're for the English Parliament. And maybe we have to realize that the English, like so much else, are among the first to have a representative institution of this sort. The Scots joined in, so now we have the Parliament of the United Kingdom, and that has developed, and it has developed in all of its complexities, because we're dealing with the initial stages, much like the syllabus of the 1970s. We were just talking about the syllabi, and I can remember doing my first. Oh, how simple it was. Just the big points, and they all had to be mimeographed. We were poor then. I mean, now that we are rolling in dough, it's a different world, but in the day, it was very simple. Maybe one page, and on the back, it's printed. Now it is a virtual tome. Oh, and you say, how could something so basic become so complicated? Time has a way of that, doesn't it? Rule on rule on rule. So if you're ever having a real slow night, I defy you to read about the Parliament of the United Kingdom and be thankful we're not doing that here. We're simply doing the basics of the medieval English Parliament. And thus, London, I love Edinburgh just as much as the next person, but that is a whole nother story. What we want to see, of course, is how it evolved, and to appreciate the fact that, I don't know, if you were going on a quiz show and you could call me, phone a friend, that kind of thing, I could help you. But you think, what if the question was, when was the first Parliament? What time? Some of us might say 1264 to 65. Not that you have to know dates, but I know you're good at it. So you shouldn't take advantage of the other students because of your great knowledge, and I know you wouldn't. But 12, I mean, because you're code, don't most of us think about Simon de Montfort? Yeah, I mean, that's just the way it is. But then you go to one of these history conventions. Yeah, a medieval constitutional history convention. Yeah. Yeah, and you think, when is the break coming? I mean, do we have to stay for all the sessions? Do we have an open bar? If you're into that scene. But basically, then someone will say, I believe we are thinking of Edward I. And you say, do people really do that? Yes, I've been to them. Hour after hour of these papers. Yeah. Now, it wasn't really Simon de Montfort. It was Edward I. And what it means is, as we understand a parliament, because we saw that before about the idea of having the nobles and the clergy, and then in the back, of course, the poor folks from the Rotary Club or the Lions Club, and thinking they are the people with the leadership in the communities. So they were there, but basically they were there to be used and then sent home. It's been real. All of this then is to say that regardless of whether we want to give Simon de Montfort credit, and believe me, his nephew Edward I didn't, because they parted on unpleasant terms, shall we say. But it's obviously important to keep them both in mind, even though their role, as it had, I mean, is rather limited. Then we go to Edward II, and what do we think about him? Well, he was, shall we say, a negative influence, because he obviously and his friends were not going to help the development of Parliament, but they were going more or less to oppose it. And the great nobles, who weren't getting in on the favors of Edward II, were probably supporting their presence. So that, in that sense, I guess you could say the Edward II period is largely significant in terms of Parliament, simply because he was such a drag, and his friends. But Edward III, now we really reached the one. That's why I say, when we think of the 14th century, most of us do think of Edward III, remember, 50-year reign. And of course, we have wars, and wars are expensive. And Edward III was a popular monarch during most of his reign. And he was popular. We think of democracy in terms of who's popular, like most popular in the class or something of that sort. But I think we're talking about popular with your equals, or sort of the equals. And of course, I'm speaking here of the nobility. Now we have a ruler who is one of us. He likes to fight. He loves the ladies. In other words, all the chivalry that we've talked about before. This is a guy we can hang with, as they say. So I think that is a very important figure. Now, you say, does that mean that they love to get hit up for contributions? Because I remember all of this is about what we also politely call nowadays funding. I know there's so many polite euphemisms for dig it out. Yeah, we want a check. I mean, it's an industry. Let's face it. All of this is to say that you got to have many ways to raise money. And it's not selling Krispy Kremes as we did in school. Oh, God, yes, I remember getting my various student groups out selling those donuts, even though they weren't healthy. But that didn't stop the people in the trailers from buying them. I'd send out, and I'd think, someday I'm going to have to pay for this, because I've led people into wrongdoing. Yeah, to the evil of Krispy Kremes. They're nice, I'm sure, but it's just not good for you, I think. Probably a tossed salad would be better, but doesn't have the same value. The idea, of course, is where do we get all these funding opportunities? Well, there's going to be a lot of land. And remember how they all talk, especially in the South, about being land pool? So these lords have lots of land, and there is a lot of profit off of that. And the wars are, in a sense, as much about them as it is for the king. We all love it. It's great. So the idea is he's not going to have much of a problem getting them. Now, who would be trouble? Well, it might be the clergy up to a point, the church. Because the Catholic Church, the church in England, not Church of England, but church in England, is going to be more or less a repository of great wealth. Tithing is not voluntary. It's not like making your little yearly pledge. This is like tax. And virtually everyone is Catholic, so therefore everyone will pay the tithe for the church. Unfortunately for these churchmen, of course, this means that the king is going to want his, what should we say, cut. And this is going to be a problem. So the church's funds will have to be shared by kings. I gathered that in that day and age, people didn't have such a problem with understanding the varying goals might be different between that of the church and that of the monarchs. In other words, is war good for the church? Because they considered the king sort of agent of God, and the people who are so-called Christians in France need to be put in their place. So they worked it out, and they, as they used to say, paid their fair share for the expenses that the king might ask. Sometimes a little coercion had to be used, and this group became very, very significant. Of course, there is also the people that in France we know lovingly as the third estate. In other words, everybody else. Those who are not clergy and those who are not nobles. Give me your rich, your poor, your middles. They're all there. And they too, as we will see, are going to be required to pay their fair share. What I think is so interesting here is to appreciate the fact that as Edward III began to call these sessions, and remember, it had to be the king. Couldn't say like a bunch of these people could just say, you know, we'd like to have a parliament. Or maybe they have a regular time of meeting. Again, this is like the regularization. Again, like I think they actually send out announcements about all the things that have to be included in the syllabus now. We're talking serious bulk, okay? On and on, addendum after addendum. I'm not saying that's bad, I'm just saying that's just the way it is. And in the day, you just, whatever. So all of this meant that the king's exchequer members said, in effect, you know, our books are not looking as good as we would wish. That campaign cost a little more than we thought. So what do we need to do? He said, oh, I know where I can get it. I can call a parliament. So all of this means that from the monarchical point of view, it wasn't like ratemyking.com. It was, in a sense, sucking that money out. And doing so, I guess, tactfully. Because why wouldn't the nobles want to help? We love our king. He's a great guy. He parties with the best of them. God and the king, you know, that kind of thing, we all pour the mead and don't hold back. That's a drink that I don't want you all to have. It's not good. But it tastes mighty good. I'll say that for it. The idea, though, of having these sessions means I don't think they were there for long discussions about, well, does anybody have any other business? When are we going to raise? No, we don't do any of that. You're here to vote me another particular kind of tax or additional revenue. And then, as much fun as it was getting to see you, because I guess he had the nobles, maybe the high clergy over for dinner, like a reception, the VIPs. I don't think he had merchants or any of that crowd, but I'm sure he had a nice social business, and then send them on their way because I gotten what I need. I don't need anything else. So you'll notice 48 sessions. Now, can you imagine you're a historian of the English Parliament, so you count sessions? Yes, there are people who do that. Yeah, professionally. And that 48 sessions in all of his reign, well, they don't last long, as I say. And a lot of time is probably spent in what we of the working orders would consider wasted time. But I mean, that's all that social doings, But again, we are not invited because we're not of that level. Sorry. But once the king did it, you're ready to leave. I mean, unless you're up close and personal. I mean, I guess some people were significant enough. I mean, consider the king. Have you thought about all of his sons? Lord, there's a whole bunch of them. I mean, the Black Prince. But there are others, and all of them have, shall we say, large entourages. So all of them have to be wined and dined while all this is going on. So I never forget the social element while the king's getting money. Now, of course, even now, I don't know if this is forever. I don't know why, but I tend to wonder if the House of Lords is really necessary in the British democracy, but it's still there, although I don't think they have hereditary peerages anymore. I think it's more or less those who have it because of their personal honors, and it's all based on your own accomplishments, not somebody else's. Never mind that. I get off on the 21st century and don't mean to. It's simply to note over time, as opposed to our friends across the water, France, it will be a bicameral body, and the lords will separate themselves from everybody else. Now, how did everybody else even come there in the first place? Well, who could forget Simon de Montfort? I won't. And nobody in the House of Representatives next tour to DC. Check and see if I didn't tell you the truth. Send me a postcard, or better, buy me a t-shirt. I know, filthy bribery. Yeah. But the idea is that these people who are not noble and who are not part of the clergy, they don't fit in. Yes, they have money, fat bank accounts, but Do we really want to be associated with them? What are they good for? Money. Ugh. You know, I always laugh because I think about 1789 and think about some of the nobles, the nobility of France. People like MasterCard or Visa would be calling them, you know, we didn't get your last payment. And I think, you were talking about nobles were in debt? Yes, it's so embarrassing. You know, the Duke and Duchess, and you think you're high and mighty. You think those third estate people, the Bank of Paris? No, they're loaded. They don't get any calls from the Visa people. They are fine. Thank you merci beaucoup. Yeah. So the idea is lords and commons are a division merely on status and, of course, the fact that the king normally is the one who will bring them together, these lords. Now, the lords are an interesting bunch. I won't mention so much nowadays as I'll mention the lords of that time. First of all, I think it's very interesting the lower clergy are not called. They had been called in the past, and you think, what do you mean by a lower clergy? Well, if you are pastor of, Nowheresville, it's nothing wrong with being from a hamlet, though we don't want to say anything ugly to those who are from rural communities. They're very fine. But if you ask the priest there, well, I wonder how is your income adequate for your needs? Normally the answer would be in the negative because they are, oh God, what they used to say, poor as Job's turkey. I mean, it's like they just do not have a lot of going on. In other words, they have that hierarchy working. So if you get sent to Our Lady of the Country parish, then it's not like you're going to say, oh, goody. Boy, I've got a great place and nice parish house and all the accommodation. No. You are headed for Nowheresville in the church society. So the idea is the lower clergy don't have participation in this to any extent. Maybe they had at first, but they really don't have the wherewithal to pay a major part. So they will have what's called a convocation. Some of you may know that term from Sewanee, for example. Remember that? The convocation? Yeah. We know that from the Latin. But the convocation is very significant because, oh, you're going to pay, don't you worry. It's not like, gee, I wonder if he's going to bring up money. Duh. I mean, that's why you're there. He's just gonna, the fundraising spiel. You're gonna, after graduation, when you have your first Auburn Club meeting. I mean, it's like, of course you're going to join. So it just depends on how much of a contribution you're going to make. But that is the idea here that in the convocation, your lower clergy would make their particular decision as to the amount. And I'm sure they got instructions, encouragement from the appropriate royal officials. But that really is not connected to Parliament. It's just a way of letting you know that they weren't part of House of Lords or House of Commons. The House of Lords through the 14th century would consist of greater barons. And I notice when I put greater there, that greater means it's not like every baron, all through England. Everybody who's barren, it simply means the top of the level. You heard that Orwell thing, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. These are those that are even more equal than others. You understand, those are the barons. These are the biggies. The little barons. I don't know when they invented baronet. Yeah, I know. Wouldn't that be embarrassing if you got invited to a party? Said, I'm just a baronet. Yeah, well, that's good. Maybe we'll have something left over. You can have, we run out of ice, but maybe you could drink it on the rock. No, without. All of this is to say that the greater barons are the ones who are going to be up there because they can. And think, boy, if you're a fan of nepotism, and we were talking about nepotism earlier, this body is so nepotistic because think about who will be the barons, the greater barons. The king's brothers, the king's nephews. I mean, on and on it goes. That these are powerful. It doesn't mean they have a lot of money. It simply means they have a lot of land. And because of all of that land, they are title holders and they get invited to the after parliament meeting at the receptions and all of that. So that group, and then of course, the clergy that really count. And I wonder if somebody was there to take roll. Because you think, would all the bishops be there? Would all the abbots? I mean, could they have many Our Fathers and Hail Marys to say? I mean, we got a lot of responsibilities as abbot of a monastery. And we are talking about the big monasteries. I mean, again, if you have St. Hilary in morning or something, you're in Yahooville, some small little house. It's real sweet and lovely monks and nuns, really nice folks. And no, you don't have to worry. We won't need you there. Because many of these abbots were virtually like CEOs. I mean, you become an abbot. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, could you imagine the responsibility? And remember, there's no golden parachute. Yeah, exactly. And no pension either. So don't plan on, hitting Scotland, yeah, I'm going to take it easy, man. I'm going up to the Highlands. No, you're not. You're going to work until you drop. This is not the idea of going into some comfortable life ahead. You will work. All of that means these people are part of that House of Lords. And then you're going but what about when the poor old abbot kicks off? Well, that's when the monks come together and elect a new one. So it just goes on. And how long will it go on? Come back in 2026. And you'll be told that. So you can wait in bated breath. No, don't bait. No. Keep breathing. But yeah, that's a fascinating story in itself. And these are called the peers. These are abbots, these are bishops, and these are the major one. Do they all come? No, but they're called. And you say, what? Hark, you mean some do not answer the call? Well, they say they have something else that might be better or more important. Does the king, is that upsetting? I think he gets over it because I think whatever is done in the parliament, somebody is going to let you know. So simply because you missed the meeting, I don't think they had Zoom back then, but they had, there's no reason why you have to miss all the good news about the new tax rates, because there's, you might not be there, but it may be on the test. Okay, so you're responsible for that material. I hope that's clear. I mean, it's not like everybody goes to every session. Ooh, I might miss something. I think it's a little more leisurely than that. Or I hate to say leisurely, but just more casual. That some people might say, that's a big market week for us. We've got a lot going on there at the house. I have to bring in some brothers for disciplinary action. Just can't make it to London because you don't travel back then. I mean, it could be very, very hard. But these peers normally would come to participate and associate themselves in that way with the king's will. But the House of Commons, that's it's very interesting because, again, you always wonder whether or not someday it will be a unicameral session. Maybe there won't be a monarchy. I mean, who needs to speculate about the future? But in the democracy that Britain is, more or less, the House of Commons is where all the power is. The House is, of course, consisting of people who include the Prime Minister and all the cabinet members, and we understand that, I'm sure you knew this, that you can't be a lord and be a member of the House of Commons. All of this is to say that the House of Commons might have had a murkish beginning, but it changed over the centuries. The House of Commons, despite our understanding of the term common, refers to people of wealth and authority. Like I say, Rotary Club, people that, I'm in the Chamber of Commerce, that kind of Dadeville, wherever the may be, the Berg, around there, these folks carry the great authority, prestige. And in the Commons, these people who were leaders in their burgs and towns, plus individuals we call the Knights of the Shire or gentry. Heard lots about that in school, as I'm sure some of you did. The idea of the knights, and then, of course, we think about knights in armor and chasing the lady and all that. In this case, I don't think we're so much talking about that kind of knight angle, but we're talking about the individuals that we all know from British satire, Pip Pip and all that, who puts up the, those little glasses and and he walks around the lands. Now you say, well, they're not going to get to be in the House of Lords. No. But in the area, that countryside, you big stuff. Oh, everybody oh, yeah. Ooh. Everybody's got to be big somewhere. I mean, let's face it. This is just a matter of these knights, gentry, as they will be known, they have great authority in their areas. And then these individuals who sometimes are called burgesses, I just call them Rotarians for short, but you get the image of maybe you run the Bank of Lincoln or whatever it is, because those folks are real loaded. And of course, you say, well, does that make them important? Well, it does to a lot of other folks, yeah. And you say, but what about the peasants division? Are they going to get to share in this? Their own Comer Hall, as it were, there in the British Parliament? Nay, nay, because your will is represented by others. We think about you a lot. And we speak for you. Remember, the voice of people is the voice of God. So we are there for you. You of the FAA, we love you. All of that is said. You got it. Thank you. The idea being, of course, that these elements, and we don't know exactly how it happened, because these people, if you were like a member of the gentry, and somebody came, Lions Club or something like that, and selling light bulbs and coming around, and who are those people? And say, oh, those are people who are quite prominent in the local group. I don't want them near me. That is very, very interesting to observe how these two groups will gradually come together. Could it be kismet? I mean, is it like they go online, find each other? No, nothing so romantic. I would like it to be that way. But I'm thinking it's like these individuals see a common purpose in uniting. You have money, I have land. We could be good together. That kind of thing. You think, is this sinister? No, it's just realistic. And you have a son and I have a daughter. Yeah. So does this mean they find love? They find mutual opportunity. And that's the truth. These two groups coming together. Could it be parents having common interests? I think so. Because it happens. And it's not like they liked each other or they found each other. It's not going to be Rogers Hammerstein, okay? They did not pick this up to do a score from this. This is strictly, maybe, after you get married, you hang out a while and you say, yeah, your parents are kind of common, but, in the end, you have counseling and then you say, well, maybe you're not too bad after all, you do have money. Yeah. We do enjoy that extra money that this estate brings in. But yeah, and then of course what will happen is, and it also sounds kind of Marxist, in the House of Commons, we're going to have both land and money represented by the people there. And again, it's not everybody's there. I like to remind people, you are the big stuff in your local community. Because there are lots of you in your community, I'm sure. Maybe not as important as the Drakes, but there may be people kind of on your level, well, near your level. But these people, they say, well, we want to have a time that we could be in Montgomery or maybe even higher, who knows? But the idea is that people of this sort were normally chosen. Who chooses them? Well, there is a principal at the shire, and maybe you have various officials who supervise the decision. And do you think it's all honest and above board? I'm going to have to remain somewhat silent on that issue. because sometimes evil can prevail. Yeah, there could be some corruption. Yes. But I'm sure you're not surprised about that to understand, of course, the possibility that people were elected by nefarious means. In other words, they were not there because of any good deeds that they did, but they were useful. Whatever the case, and a lot of this we're merely surmising, we understand that thanks to the potential wealth that could be extracted from them, this House of Commons was very, very important for King Edward III. Or should I say, the crown? You know, when that series started, I thought, I wonder things like this. You know, I should just let it go. But yeah, I said, I wonder how many people know the difference between the crown and Queen Elizabeth. Then I moved on with my life because, yeah, these weighty problems, we don't need to worry about it. But the idea, of course, is the crown is so much more than the individual monarch. All of this is to say that even way back in the 14th century, think of all the people that had to be involved in the business of the crown. Because Edward III, at least in the early years, remember, he's all fighting in France, or maybe running over to Wales or Scotland, visiting with them. Well, not visiting, but doing what he has to do. And all of this then is to say that there is quite a bit that is going on. And when these people come to London, and think how exciting it is, I'm from Nowheresville, and all the folks in the Chamber of Commerce voted for me, because you're thinking like it's a big deal to be there. And then you start meeting with others, and it's more like, are we going to do just what they tell us to do, or we've got our own ideas? And I think that's very, very significant here. Now, if you had brought people who had been suppressed and they didn't have enough bread, I mean, but these people, I don't want to think of them as being, you know, hovering around the Bastille, you know, in 1789. This is more people who are comfortable. And they want to use that quote unquote comfort for the purposes of authority. Are they pacifists? Oh, I don't think so. But they're not on the side of war either. As I tell you, wars are expensive. And these people are going to have to pay for them because, you know, there's going to be another war tax or something of the sort. So they tend to say, well, maybe your armies can make do on reduced budget. Imagine saying that to a general or admiral. I mean, I don't think that's what they want to hear. We just got to have it. We just got to, all of that. So this will become a very important area because up in the House of Lords, they're saying more, more, more. The king needs it. The king wants it. France can be ours. All of that. So this will be a very, very important issue. And here there will come the matter of House of Commons and its members are going to want a little recognition, because they're not there to be a cash cow, as they say. They are there to be listened to because they have concerns. No, we're not going to have better schools or have a dental plan or any of that. No, all of that is totally modern. But I think they wish to be taken seriously and to have some concerns about their own local government and how the crown and its resources can be utilized for the betterment of their part of the country. I think it's very interesting, though, because we know that by the middle of Edward III's reign, there will be a sense of they will submit petitions. And believe me, it's humble. But when you read them, you say, boy, that's a lot of breast beating. Yes, I don't know if they really felt it. I don't know how sincere it is. When you read some of these things, you think, I don't think people do it that as much anymore, your humble servant and all that. But that's clear in all of these petitions. And that will go on through the 17th century when we chopped the poor man's head off. Charles I, yeah, 1649. Not to get technical with you, but because you know all of that, but you get pumped, yeah, you get ready. Yeah, please.
You're talking about raising the money for the army.
Oh yeah,
How do they raise the troops for the army?
mercenaries. They were largely. It's not a thing around like Job's going from up north, going to join the army. No, I like to think that most of the troops were either part of a certain lord's entourage, and then they would become part of the king's forces. But I am not aware, the idea of the Army of Patriots, then I think of the 18th century, because most of these armies, I think, were chosen and selected by military training, because let's face it, most men were still utilized for agriculture, because that's what they had to do. But thank you for bringing that up, because these individuals, again, have to be taken care of. I mean, they may not have gotten any kind of medical care or anything like that, and benefits for the widows and children, but as long as they were in military service, they had to be fed and clothed and all the rest. And we all know that's not for free. Meanwhile, these petitions on behalf of Commons members were basically taken by Crown officials. And I suspect, again, many of you won't be surprised, His Majesty will be glad to receive these. Oh, you know how people do, and they put that hoity-toity on, it's like, yeah, I bet he just can't wait. I mean, yeah. But more or less, these petitions are presented by members of Commons to the Crown. And at some point in Edward III's reign, someone must have said, you know what? before we can look over those books and vote on our allocation this session, we'd like an answer on that petition we submitted. And you're thinking, wow. Oh, as our friends in Britain would say, cheeky. Because, that's kind of nervy to say to somebody, well, we'll see. I mean, how would I feel, if for an evaluation said, yeah, I'll wait and see what my grade is, and then I'll decide whether you get a 2 or a 3. I mean, that's hurtful, because it's just power. I'll be fired. All because I didn't make the muster. So this will become very, very important. And of course, can you imagine the strategists that must have been involved in this way the House of Commons gradually got power? Because it is, as we say today, the power of the purse. Because you want to talk about another allocation, we'll be glad to talk to you. Now, I didn't say that to the king directly, but to royal officials. Can you imagine sassing the king like that? But I'm just thinking, you'd say, yeah, we're excited about our talking and arranging that. But as long as we're talking, we have a petition here we would like for you to see. So that element of consideration of petitions. And this, of course, is the way that royal statutes would develop. Statutes used to be any kind of royal enactment. Not anymore. Royal statutes came about because of proposals usually made by House of Commons. And you wanted to talk about money. Well, we want to talk about money too, but let's talk about some action on our petition. You see where I'm going with this? I mean, it's just the financial power represented by members of the House of Commons. These statutes are best illustrated in the 14th century by two. And I brought these up because both are very interesting, I think, because the statute of provisors deals with what were called provisions, meaning, well, the filth of nepotism is back in, yeah. You think, no, you don't mean cousins are getting jobs? Yes, I do. Let us say you have a bright young nephew. Well, he thinks he's bright. You think he's bright. And so, in that day and age, he wasn't married, so he could get a clerical position. So you put him up to be the pastor of St. Hildy's or whatever. And then maybe the king has somebody he likes better for that job. Or nay, what if the Pope has somebody? I mean, you think, oh my gosh, you mean a conflict of interest? Yes, I do. And they were using this. Oh, I mean, could you imagine being in Montgomery, Washington, and all these people come in and say, well, draw, all that? It was that bad back then. And they call it provisions. Some people also, you probably know about multitasking. That fascinates me. I do well to do single tasking, but according to this theory was, to make a really decent living, I need to have multiple provisions. And I can have one of my associates carry out the actual work, say mass here and there, whatever needs to be done, baptism here, a burial there, that kind of thing. Well, the statute of provisors basically cuts the individuals who are going to establish these provisions down to the person who is, shall we say, the owner of the manor where the provision is. Like if your land extends over that particular area, that will be yours. And so we don't want Luigi coming in and saying, oh, it's mine, that's mine. Holy Papa said, no, you're out. And you say, oh, you'll go to hell for keeping me out. Yeah, well, you'll be dead before that. Yeah, because communications, you don't have to worry too much about being caught up. The statute of labor, some of you may know about because what we're going to talk about next week. And that is in the throes of the Black Death, with population decrease, just, I guess, as in the COVID period, and maybe still going on. Workers are not as available as we would like. So, what does that mean? Well, I think it was 2021. I was picketing outside here, demanding a raise. I said, I want more. Because, well, not really, but it's, you didn't believe it, really. The idea, though, is seriously that fewer workers will mean higher pay. And you think, well, yeah, that's what I guess economics teaches them. Well, maybe so, but it didn't convince the monarchy and the statute of provisors. And believe me, people in the House of Commons weren't saying more money for the working people. Yeah, that's what we want. No, they did not. They said, keep them down. Yeah, you're lucky to be getting any money. And I'm not saying anything against the Chamber of Commerce. I'm just saying that's the way it was. The mass of people really didn't have much of a voice. So this statute concept, I don't ever want to think that this has to do with democracy or making life better for the little people or the 14th century New Deal. No, this is all got to be about the interests of the privileged. No question about that. But I mentioned those two statutes because I think they're both very important. And they serve the interests of the crown and, of course, the upper classes. Because, again, you don't want those pope people coming into your land and deciding who's going to be the pastor of that church. And, I know what you're thinking. All right, now name the authors of the 4 Gospels. Now, how many of Paul's letters can you identify? No, I don't think they're going to do an A in Bible study. No. But Uncle Luigi will come after you if you don't give me this job. And yeah, because this is a main, very, very serious source of good jobs, clerical jobs. And you have to read a little bit, a little gospel here, a little epistle there. You get it. Probably don't. I think Old Testament would be optional, though. But I don't think you have to do that. And then there's Edward. Boy, oh boy. we always like to think of the golden years. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. His best years had gone, long gone. His reign, there were many, here's a vocabulary, nefarious, corrupt people around him, accepting bribes. In other words, it was so bad that apparently even people in Commons, the House of Commons, probably began to take notice, and as they did so, they will actually begin that process, which we know also well nowadays, of impeachment. And this actually happens for the first time because you can well imagine that if you had done this on, say, at Edward first or somebody like that, I don't think it would be too well received. The first two officials of Edward III, and believe me, I mean, you wouldn't see him at the, remember back in the old days, they had him on the post office wall. Remember that? Wanted. Yeah. And you're thinking, ooh, they're corrupt. Yeah. So wicked. But in this case, they must have reached a level of corruption that they had to be brought out, and two were then tried in the House of Lords. See, this is what's always hard for people to understand. Not you, but I mean, I remember teaching this, that having the distinction between impeachment and conviction, they never got it. It was real hard. It's like you think impeachment, you're out, but you're not. You can easily enough be exonerated. In this case, however, the process, and the American process, follows a similar path of the House and then the Senate for the actual trial. So it comes from that English tradition. But believe you me, it was embarrassing, I suspect, for the crown. But I've always figured these two folks in Edward III's reign were so flagrantly corrupt, in terms of, activities that we could not imagine in our purity. But, giving jobs to people who are not deserving and taking bribes and that kind of thing, graft. I know. But we're thankful that we have our virtue, and then we see these others. All of this is to say that poor old Edward was not doing a good job, and he had more and more what I guess politely they call today handlers in those latter years, because he died in 1377. And of course, I know everybody here remembers who died in 1376. Yes, the Black Prince. So, yeah, I know. The vanity, I'll send you all on a quiz show and you can earn money and give it all to Ollie. 1376, and you're thinking, Lord, that man is broken, surrounded by all kinds of wicked people, like characters from Sodom and Gomorrah. So, nothing that we need to worry ourselves about, but let's just say that he wasn't a golden ager. He was definitely not living a life of virtue and contemplation. Instead, the government, the crown, the royal government, had become so corrupt that this so-called, oh, I love this, the good parliament. I'm not good at what, but I think it's good in the sense of like, we're going to do something. And 1376, not a good year. Well, I mean, the king's dead the next year. And remember, ladies are taking rings off our fingers, but not a good sign for the future. So all of this means it's a very turbulent time. And meanwhile, these two people I was talking about will be indicted and convicted. And you think, gosh, what does it mean? Well, in fact, I'm thinking maybe this would never happen in Auburn, Opelika, but you might have to move to Tuskegee, Montgomery to escape. I mean, I think some of these people actually hightailed it across the channel and maybe settled in Nice or Monte Carlo. I don't know. But you didn't stay around because you know you like to keep your head on your body. Yeah. I love it. I love to have a head right where it is. All of that, though, if you want to come back, remember you're wanted. A post office picture will all remind all patrons about you and you're wanted. And it's very interesting. I mean, it's embarrassing for you because remember these people, we're not getting the local folks. It's not like we need you for some special agricultural project. It's like these people were people of the upper classes who were employed by the royal government. Now, what have we got going on here? Well, I'll tell you what we got. We don't say anything about the king. You know what? We love the king. How much do we love him? More than you can express. More than you could put in a Hallmark card. This is total love. Oh, how many hearts can we put? Oh, sometimes though, the people we love are being misled and taken advantage of. And that's the king that we kiss. I mean, we love. Yeah. But you understand, we don't, a king, he's perfect. King, God, king, yeah. Yeah. I mean, you got that. We're not ready to do that and say, you know, that king's kind of a loser. No. The king is good and pure, and he was misled by these terrible people. So, of course, 1377 happens, and you say, where do we go now? Well, we certainly don't go to the Black Prince because he passed on the year before his father. And you say, but doesn't he have a lot of other sons? Yes, he does. And you say, wouldn't it have been better if one of them had been the next king? Maybe so, but that's not the way it worked. If it hadn't been the one I lovingly call Little Richard, then perhaps that would have happened. There were some very interesting figures. But as it turned out, this young man, I guess about 10, now became nominal king. Grandson of Edward III, son of the Black Prince. He was hardly ready to be ruler. Again, we're not surprised that his mother, remember she was the Black Prince's cousin. Won't get into how that worked out, but just to understand that they'll call it the mother queen, the queen mother, was a very powerful soul in her own right, and she would enjoy great power during Richard's reign from 1377 to 1399 and give us what many people would say one of Shakespeare's greatest plays, at least I think so. And we will do that next week. Okay. So thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.